Chapter 6. Motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. So, a study is done by Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. So, it's about a soda bottles, and the water bottles. So, before this is the diagram. The soda bottles and only the water bottles are in these dark squares, and after the water bottles are in these all dark squares. The sales of the water bottles are increased by 25% in these dark squares. Okay, so people often choose products not because of what they are, but because of where they are. Okay, so your habits change depending on the room you are in and in the queues in front of you. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Despite our unique personalities, certain behaviors tend to arise more and again under certain environmental conditions. The most common form of change is not internal but external. We are changed by the world around us, and every habit is context dependent. In 1936, psychologist Scott Lewin wrote a simple equation that makes a powerful statement. Behavior is a function of the person and their environment. Okay. So similarly, in 1952, economist Hawkins Stone described a phenomenon he called suggestion impulse buying, which is triggered when a shopper sees a product for the first time and visualizes a need for it. In other words, customer will occasionally buy products not because they want them, but because of how they are presented to them. Items at the eye level tend to be purchased more than down near the floor. For this reason, you will find expensive brands name featured in easy to reach locations on store shelves because they drive the most profit, while cheaper alternatives are tucked away in harder to reach spots. Okay, so the most obviously available a product or a service is, the more likely you are to try it. And this is the truth. However, many of the actions we take each day are shaped not by purposeful drive and choice by the most obvious option. This is the human tendency. So, the most powerful of all human sensory abilities, however, is vision. And the human body has about 11 million sensory receptors. Approximately 10 million are those dedicated to sight. Some expert estimated that half of the brain's resources are used on vision. Given that we are more dependent on vision than on any other sense, it should come as no surprise that visual cues are the greatest catalyst of our behavior. For this reason, a small change in what you see can lead to a big shift in what you do. As a result, you can imagine how important it is to live and work in environments that are filled with productive cues and devoid of unproductive cues. So thankfully, there's a good news in this respect. So you don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can also be the architect of it. Okay, so don't you don't consume your environment. You can create your own environment. So in this book, the author gives a method to create your own environment or to architect your own environment. So every habit is initiated by a cue, and we are more likely to notice cues that stand out. Our human mind is more likely to notice only the cues that stand out. Unfortunately, the environment where we live and the work often make it easy not to do certain action because there is no obvious cues to trigger that behavior. So, like it's not easy to practice the guitar when it's tucked away in the closets. It it's easy not to read a book when the bookshelf is in the corner of the guest room. It's not easy to take your vitamins when they are out of the sight. So when the cues that spark a habit are the subtle or hidden, they are easy to ignore. By comparison, creating obvious visual cues can draw your attention towards a desired habit. Okay. So here are the few ways you can redesign your environment and make the cues for your preferred habits more obvious. So like these are examples. So if you want to remember to send more thank you notes, keep a stack of stationery on your desk. If you want to drink more water, fill up a few water bottles each morning and place them in common locations around the house. So if you want to make a habit a big part of your life, make the cue a big part of your environment. And the most persistent behavior usually have a multiple cues. So the same strategy can be employed for good habits. By sprinkling triggers throughout your surrounding, you increase the odds, means you increase the probability of getting this habit throughout the day, and make sure the best choice is the most obvious one. And making a better decision is easy and natural when the cues for good habits are right in front of you. Environment design is powerful not only because it influences how we engage with the world, but also because we really do it. Most people live in a world others have created for them, but you can alter the space where you live and walk to increase your exposure to positive cues and reduce your exposure to negative ones. Environment design allows you to take control and become the architect of your life. Be the designer of your world and not merely the consumer of it. Okay, so always design your own world. The context is the cue. This is the first part of this line, which is the context is the cue. Means cue will trigger our rewards. So a cue that triggers a habit can start out very specific, but over time your habit becomes associated not with the single trigger but with the entire context s- surrounding the behavior. We mentally assign our habits to the locations in which they occur: the home, the office, the gym. Each location develops a connection to certain habits and routines. You establish a particular relationship with the objects. For example, on your desk, the items on your kitchen counter. So our behavior is not defined by the objects in the surrounding, but by the relationship to the them. In fact, this is a useful way to think about the influence of the environment on on your behavior. Stop thinking about your environment as filled with objects. Start thinking about this as filled with a relationship. Okay. So think in terms of how you interact with the spaces around you. So different people can have different memories and thus different habits associated with the same place. And the good news is you can train yourself to link a particular habit with the particular context. Okay, this is a very good line. So, the power of context also reveals an important strategy. Habits can be easier to change in a new environment. Habits can be easier to change in a new environment. Okay, it helps to escape the subtle triggers and cues that nudge you toward your current habits. Go to a new place, a different coffee shop, a bench in the a park, a corner of your room you seldom use, and create a new routine there. It is easier to associate a new habit with a new context than to build a new habit in the face of the competing cues. But when you step outside your normal environment, you leave your behavioral biases behind. You aren't battling old environmental cues, which allows new habits to form without interruptions. So when you can't manage to get an entirely new environment, you can also redefine or rearrange your current ones. Create a separate space for walk, study, exercise, entertainment, and cooking. The mantra I find useful is one space, one use. Each habit is like one space and one use. Okay, so whenever possible, avoid mixing the context of one habits with another. When you start mixing context, you will start mixing habits, and the easier one will usually win out. And this is one of reason why the versatility of modern technologies both strength and a weaknesses. So if you can manage to stick with this strategy, each context will become associated with a particular habit and mode of thought. Habits thrive under predictable circumstances like these. Focus comes automatically when you are sitting at your own work desk. So, if you want behaviors that are stable and predictable, you need an environment that is predictable and stable. So, behavior is directly proportional to the environment you are living in. So, a good behavior will be directly proportional to the good environment. Okay, so if you live in good environment, if you live in good environment, your behavior will also be good. Is a vice versa. So a stable environment where everything has a place and a purpose is an environment where habits can form easily. This is a chapter summary. Small changes in context can lead to large changes in behavior. Every habit is initiated by a cue, and we are more likely to notice cues that stand out. And the most important cue is like a vision. Means our half of our brain is using a vision sensors, is computing these sensors. Cues of good habits obvious in your environment. Your habits become associated not with a single trigger, but with the entire context surrounding the behavior, and the context becomes the cue. And it's easier to build new habits in a new environment because you are not fighting against old cues. Thank you.